Good morning. I want to start by asking you a question, and I want you to give me an honest answer. Not the answer that you think the person next to you is going to give as you look out of the corner of your eye. Not the answer that you think I want to hear. Just an honest answer. Do you care about the environment? Now, before you raise your hands, I just want to clarify. I'm not asking if you're passionate about the environment. I'm not asking if you're an environmental activist. I just want to know if you're concerned. Do you care about the environment? So looking around the room here today, I see lots of you have your hands up. For those who don't have your hands up, an attendant will be along shortly to escort you from the hall today. Just kidding. But for those of you that have your hands up, basically you're reinforcing what we found in academic and in market research studies over the last 30 years, that when surveyed, about 80% of the population says, yes, I'm concerned about the environment. I'm concerned about climate change. I care about the environment. Or so they say. But how does that attitude translate into behavior? When you think of your own actions, what do you do that translates the attitude you have towards the environment into a behavior? What do you do on a daily basis? I don't need to know the answers, but just think about it in your head. And basically, probably what you'll find is that on one hand, you've got your attitude, on the other hand, you've got your behaviors, but the two don't entirely mesh together. Your attitude is probably stronger than your behavior. And what we have in the middle is what we call the gap, the attitude-behavior gap. And it's something that's puzzled government agencies and environmental groups and environmentalists who are trying to encourage pro-environmental behavior. How do we reduce this attitude-behavior gap? So, what do we do now? We've got this gap. We could lament over how we're not able to slow down climate change as fast as we'd like. We could complain about the people who aren't jumping on board the environmental train. But where's that going to get us? What we need to do is acknowledge that there's a connectivity problem and that there's an opportunity before us that we can take advantage of. The glass is not half empty. So what I want to talk to you about today is two unlikely entities working together, really working together to create change. On one hand, we have marketing, and the other hand, we have sustainability, what I like to call marketing for sustainability. So what happens if we put these two together? Magic can happen. Well, maybe not magic altogether, but good things can happen. So today I'm going to tell you about 5 things that we need to get right related to marketing in order to create change. And before I begin, I want to put a call out to the engineers and the scientists and the designers in the audience. When I say the word marketing, do your eyes start to glaze over and you pull your phone out of your pocket and start to surreptitiously flip through your messages to see what's been going on? You might not think that you have a role to play in marketing products and services and so forth, but you play a fundamental role in this equation. And we need you to make this magic happen. And you need us, so we need to work together. So let's get started. Number 1, don't assume that information leads to action. So I want to give you an example of what I usually do in my social marketing class that I teach. On the first day, I usually start off by asking the students to brainstorm about all of the ideas that they can come up with related to how to get students on campus to carry reusable mugs so that when they get their coffee, they don't have to ask for it in a disposable cup. They've got their mug on them. How can we get students to do this? So they go away, and about half an hour later, they come back, and they've got all these ideas. And dollars to donuts, what they've come back with is an information campaign. Websites, social media marketing campaigns. We need to put posters up around the university. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to create the change. Now, information might feed that circle that we saw, the attitude circle, on the screen before, but it's not likely to change behavior, especially long-term behavior. So information creates this shift in attitude, but it doesn't create the behavior change that we're looking for. And let me give you an example, because there's other things at play here. So my neighbors are well-educated, concerned, responsible people. They shovel other people's driveways in the wintertime, things like that. They're nice, caring people. And they know that they should compost, but they don't. And the reason they don't is because a few years ago, when they were putting their food in the compost bin, they opened it up, and they had an encounter with what I like to refer to as an ROUS, a rodent of unusual size. And after that, no more composting. I'm never going to compost again, they said. So all the information in the world is not going to get them to compost again. Because, like I said, there are other things at play here. If we could give them a bin where we could guarantee them that no ROUS could climb inside, so that the next time they open the bin, they wouldn't see two beady little eyes looking back at them, maybe we could convince them that way. But that's a product, right? It's not information. So information will take us part of the way, but it won't take us all of the way. Okay, number 2. We need to abandon scare tactics. Media loves to play on the doom and gloom of climate change. Icebergs are melting faster than expected. Climate change is a clear and present danger. The next flood won't be biblical. These are all headlines that I looked at in recent stories about climate change. The doom and gloom is an effective way to get people's attention, but sometimes it has the opposite effect of what it's actually intending to do. So there's maybe about 20% of the population who would actually react to that message in a way where they would say, I'm going to divorce my car, I'm just going to bike around town, or I'm going to try to have a 2-minute shower or something like that. But most people, many people, they might actually have the complete opposite reaction of what the intention is with these doom and gloom messages, is that they think it's too overwhelming, I'm paralyzed, there's so much going on, we're doomed anyway, so I'm just going to live for today, and I'm going out to buy that gas-guzzling car I've always wanted, and I'm just going to drive it around because there's nothing we can do. How am I, as an individual, supposed to do anything about that poor little polar bear that's floating away on the ice floe in the Arctic? I don't know how I can change that. It's just too big. It's too much. As an individual, how can I contribute to the solution in this problem? So feeding this with fear is not an effective way to create change. So number 3, what we were talking about up until now, it's not just about what you say, but how you say it, but it's also about who you say it to. So the third thing is acknowledge that not everyone is an environmentalist. As environmentalists, we tend to think that we need to get everybody on the environmental train. We need everybody to think the way we do. But, like we've talked about before, about 20% of the population is motivated by the health of the planet. And the other 80%, they're motivated by other things. And we need to acknowledge that that's okay. It's okay to be motivated by financial concerns or health concerns. Maybe I'm motivated because I have young children and I want to feed them organic food because it's healthy. Maybe I want to save money on my electricity bill. Or maybe I have so many other things to think about that I'm just worried about putting a roof over my family's head and food on the table. So I don't have time to think about which cleaning product is greener when I go to the supermarket. So there are lots of different things going on here. And we need to acknowledge that there are different motivations and barriers, and that's okay. So we need to create messages and products and services that contribute towards these different segments of the population. So I'm going to give you an example. This was a market segmentation that was done by the Ontario Power Authority, which was a government agency in Ontario. And a few years ago, they worked with a market research company to develop what they called electric personalities. So they took market research data and they put it together and they created 4 electric personalities based on people's attitudes and psychographics and behaviors in relation to their electricity use. And then they were able to overlay what we call geodemographic data and put it all together so that they could map out where these people were likely to live in various communities. So that they could then provide that information to the local distribution companies, what we call electric utilities, and they could take that information and create campaigns that focused on these different segments. So it wasn't just one big mass marketing campaign. So that's a really great example of how we can acknowledge that there are different motivations and different ways to think about these environmental issues, and that the environment does not have to be the priority in everybody's mind, but we have to find out what that priority is. Number 4, we need to harness the power of social norms. Why do we behave the way we do? Probably a mixture of a bunch of different things. We have different attitudes and values and beliefs. And if we were all the same, life would be pretty boring. But there are lots of different things that influence the way we behave. We listen to our friends. We might listen to our parents. We listen to our teachers, mentors. Maybe we listen to celebrities, our favorite actor or our favorite football player. What are they saying? What are they wearing? And we put all this together, and it's when we look at it, we call this, to a certain extent, conformity or social norms. How should we behave, and whether people around us approve or disapprove of the way that we're behaving. So we can really harness this, and we can use it for good, but we can also use it for evil, so to speak. And one example that's really interesting, and it sort of takes us back to kindergarten in a way. In California, a number of years ago, they did a study where they took what they called door knockers, and they put them on people's doors in a certain community in California. And the information on the door knocker told them how much electricity they were using, but also how much electricity they were using in relation to their neighbor. Were you using more? Were you using less than your neighbor? And interesting things started to happen. So the people that were using more electricity than their neighbor, some of them started to use less. But what happened to the people that were using less electricity than their neighbors? Everybody wants to be the same as everybody else. So we have this, what we call the magnetic middle. And so the people that were using less electricity started to use more, which is something that we don't really want to happen. So there's a second part to this study where they went back to these same people and they put a door knocker on that had information about their electricity use. Do you use more or less than your neighbor? But then they added something else. They added a happy face if you used less than your neighbors, and a sad face if you used more. And like I said, going back to kindergarten, that happy face or that sad face of approving or disapproving of what you're doing was enough for the people who were using less electricity to actually keep using less because they wanted to see that happy face. So that's an example of a way we can sort of harness the power of social norms. But another really interesting example is something. I'm going to show you 2 images. I do a lot of work related to the music industry and sustainability. And so this first image is of a music festival in Europe. And what you see in this picture was what was left at the end of the festival. This is after everybody went home. Tents and sleeping bags and garbage all over. And they just walked away. And this is a type of social norm because the people around them are probably doing the same thing. And, oh, Joe over there, he's just dropping his garbage on the ground, so that's what I'm going to do. And everybody else is just leaving their tent, so why should we bother taking ours down? Just walk away. So that's a social norm. Not a good one, but it's a norm. They've created a culture or a norm. But then if you look at this next picture, which was also at a music festival, granted a much smaller one, a festival called Panama in Australia. And this picture here shows all of the garbage or waste that was left over at the end of the 3-day festival, I believe it was, and everything you see here would fit into a Ziploc bag. So the complete opposite of the first picture that I showed you. So it's possible to get thousands of people to really care about picking up their litter and create that culture and that norm. It goes both ways. So we need to harness that extraordinary power that we have with social norms to get people to create this culture of wanting to do the right thing. And finally, and this is engineers, designers, scientists, entrepreneurs, this is where I'm calling you to really listen to this next one, is number 5 is design cool things that just happen to be good for the environment. So the best example I have for this is Tesla. Tesla is the 3rd fastest production car ever made, and it's an electric vehicle. Do you think people are buying Teslas because of their environmental attributes? No, they're buying them because they're innovative. They perform really well. They're cool. Even their key fob is cool. The little fob, it's a conversation at dinner parties. Oh, who would have thought that a key fob would be something that you'd talk about for 5 or 10 minutes at a dinner party? But people do. And what we can understand about the way Teslas have been designed is that they perform at least as well, if not better, and probably better, than the average vehicle. And that's what we need to try to develop with other products and services as well. We tend to think of, when we're designing environmental products, we think of the environmental attributes first, and then the functionality later on. But the product needs to perform at least as well as its traditional counterpart if we're going to get the majority of the population on board. If you have a low-flush toilet, but you have to flush it 3 times to get it to work, as what happened in the 90s when low-flush toilets first came out, then that's not going to be very attractive. You need to solve the problem for the user and make sure that the product has a good benefit for your target audience. So Tesla is a prime example of how they've been able to make something really cool that just happens to be good for the environment. And there we have it. 5 things that we need to get right to create change. 1, we need to understand that information does not lead to action. 2, we need to abandon scare tactics. 3, we need to acknowledge that not everyone is an environmentalist. 4, we need to harness the power of social norms. And 5, we need to design cool things that just happen to be good for the environment. And if we put all this together, I'm not saying that we can save the world, but it will give us a big leg up. Thank you.